That's what that's for. No one will see it except for me, Matt, and the ACPE supervisor team. All right, so in one word, what makes you smile? And I see lots of names of people. I see children, family members, books, birds. I love all of that. Children is a big one for those of you who have children. And this is connected to how we make meaning in our lives, right? So things that bring you joy or things that make you smile. Okay, which of these best describes your morning today? Did that queue up on your phone?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna join the sleepy group, but 3 of you have already been caffeinated, apparently. All right, is everybody logged into it? Share a hobby or activity you enjoy outside of class. What do you do for fun? How many of you in the room are introverts? Maybe. Yeah. We got an answer from everybody now?
I like trying to guess who's got one answer.
Oh, yeah.
That's going through my
Yeah,
head.
yeah, sure.
I'm
Yeah.
sitting there going, who?
Want to know more about everybody in the room and what they're talking about?
Yeah. it's
Some of
interesting.
these are great questions to ask in the patient room. Have any of you used some questions like this? In your building rapport with your patients and trying to understand what's important to them? Yeah. Have you had any unusual answers that kind of made you go, wow? Outside of the typical ones that we saw up here on the screen?
I've asked that question about what makes you smile. I have done that.
Yeah.
And quite often I get family as an answer.
Mhm.
Yeah. My family.
I remember this guy in Virginia, I don't know why this is seated in my memory, told me that football was the thing that got him up in the mornings. Okay, you know, whatever does it for you. Anybody have someone say their pet or their animal?
Yeah.
Have you had somebody in a dying process that said their pet or their animal?
Yes.
And talked
Yeah.
about how much they missed their pet at home?
Very much so.
Yeah, and anybody tried to facilitate or advocate for the pet to come to the hospital before the patient member died? Have you had that experience?
I tried, but
It's
I
I bet that I would
ICU.
try
Hard
that.
no?
Yeah, it's ICU, yes, they couldn't.
I didn't have a patient that was dying, but it was a patient, and what we did was pet therapy.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
so you used a surrogate
Yeah.
pet, yeah, to fulfill the need. Or video, someone at home who could Facebook with the pet, that maybe they were with the pet, they could see the pet, talk to the pet. When I was in Virginia, that hospital owned the hospice, so you all know that we contract with some hospice organizations to come in, and we have community hospice, which is a floor, but we don't serve that floor from a spiritual care, because they have their own chaplains, right, that come in. But this particular hospital where I worked had the floor. They owned the palliative process, they owned the hospice process, so patients would be transferred, just like we do here, onto the unit. But that unit had a lot of flexibility to be able to do some really special things, and so I was able to witness pets being brought in. I remember this one particular gentleman that the one thing that he wanted, so they would bring in special last meals and things like that, order it in. This particular gentleman wanted a particular beer before he died, and we were able to facilitate getting him his can of beer, which was really fun to watch and be a part of. So how can we make meaning with people that are in our hospital and find ways to connect them, like really creative ways to connect them to that meaning. So I want you to kind of hold on to that piece as we just kind of go about the theoretical process today. The theoretical process is important. You need to know where it came from and who originated it and why. But I think the most important part of it is how do you then put it into practice when you leave the room, and how are you thinking about this particular theory? I hope each one of you, now that you've been here for a while, if someone asked you, how do you define spiritual care, meaning would be a part of that definition, because that is the core of our spirituality, is how do we define meaning. And certainly religion might be a piece of that pie, but it's so much broader than that. I mean, if I'm on my deathbed, while religion may be important to me, it's certainly not it doesn't encompass all of what I would want to make meaning for me in the midst of that process. So you want to think about that for yourself, but think about that for your patients and families as well. All right, so we're going to begin this slideshow on logotherapy, or meaning-centered therapy is how I learned it, but the technical word is logotherapy, meaning-centered counseling. And our learning objectives today, but by the time you end today, I hope that you can articulate some of the core assumptions of logotherapy. I hope that you can think about or talk together about some meaning-centered interventions like we just did, that you can observe that as we look at a case study, a little vignette together, and that you can utilize some of this and engage your learning when you're out and about in your counseling and in your inpatient settings. So the father of this theory is Viktor Frankl. Have you heard of him before? He wrote a very famous book, well, many of them, but Man's Search for Meaning is the big one, and I'll talk about it in just a minute. He was an Austrian psychiatrist, a Holocaust survivor, and that book is about his experience during the Holocaust. And there are several quotes by him in my presentation today. The first one being, meaning can be found even when suffering cannot be avoided. And he certainly could speak to his own perspective of suffering and what that was like for him, to be in the midst of imprisonment, encampment, suffering, death, dying, grief, and loss, and how he figured out ways to find meaning each day in the midst of that. So this is kind of the embodiment of his theory. Meaning in life is the major motivational factor to live. And I've given a lot of thought to that over the years, especially in terms of people who might be having suicidal ideation or are hospitalized due to that. Where are they able to find meaning, and can they, in the midst of all that's going on for them? And how, I'll just pose the question, we won't talk about it, but just for you to kind of percolate on in the days ahead, how does depression or clinical depression or any other mental health diagnosis create barriers to meaning making? And what are the ways to work around that? So there may be opportunities for you counseling interns to talk with your resident partners here at some point about your ideas and knowledge about that, because I think that would be helpful in your practice. His Holocaust experience taught him that pleasure wasn't as important as meaning. So I think it would be very difficult to find pleasure in the midst of an imprisonment situation. But I don't think it's impossible to find meaning. His situation was full of pain. Still, he focused on meaning of being there through helping others and staying optimistic about the future. He says, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And maybe we change how we make meaning. So if I'm a patient in a bed and nature is how I make meaning, and I particularly say to my chaplain or my counselor that I connect to being out in the sunshine and breathing the fresh air and seeing the butterflies and the birds, how then might we help them reorganize that in a way that that can still be a reality for them, even though they may not be able to go out into the fresh air. Or perhaps there is a way that we can get them out into the fresh air. But if not, if that is the barrier, if we're no longer able to change that part of our situation, how might we connect in the midst of the current situation we find ourselves in? This is the book that I mentioned earlier. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it, especially in this particular work that we do. A couple more quotes from the book. Even in the most painful, dehumanizing situations, life can be given meaning, and so too can suffering. We cannot avoid suffering, although we try, right? In our humanness, we want to, and sometimes we live in a false narrative of I can control all of this until we come face to face with a situation we can't control. But we can choose how to cope with it, find meaning in it, and move forward with renewed purpose. And what a gift when we can be a part of someone's journey to help them find ways to do that and discover renewed purpose, even in the midst of a dying journey. So Frankl defined this theory as logotherapy, logos being the Greek word for meaning, and logotherapy focusing on the meaning of human existence, as well as man's search for meaning, and we'll make it gender neutral and say humankind's search for meaning. According to logotherapy, the striving to find a meaning in one's life is our primary motivational force. You can take away everything that a human possesses, but as long as a human has meaning for life, they will survive. And what does survival mean? Maybe survival doesn't mean that you're going to survive in this life, right? Maybe survival means that you are preparing for your transition into whatever is to come. So there are three aspects of this logotherapy. There is creativity, we're going to talk about that in a minute. There is attitude change, and there is experience. Logotherapy encompasses how we find meaning in three ways: through our work and hobbies, and you just listed some of those for us, through experiencing life and people, love, and I would add pets to that as a very important part of meaning for people, especially people who no longer have family with them. So people who have adult children who've moved on, or maybe they live in different areas and their pet is being a surrogate for their family at that stage in their life. And then developing a positive attitude. And that doesn't mean toxic positivity. So there's a very distinction, a very real distinction between positive attitude and toxic positivity. So Frankl would say there are three pathways to meaning that you saw in that triangle. The creative values, and that is what we contribute to the world. Have you ever met someone who was in a very difficult state because they had stopped contributing? You know, and you're trying to help them reconnect and get back into that volunteering or contributing something back into the world. That is a central part of how we make meaning. So what does that look like if I'm bedbound? How do I contribute? Are there ways I can contribute? Can we get creative with them about that? Social media now is a platform that can help us do that, right? Even from our bed. When I was working in hospice, we talked a lot about writing letters. Had a friend who found out that she had terminal cancer, and her world revolved around her 4-year-old grandchild. And all she talked about was missing all of those monumental celebrations in his life up to adulthood. And she decided she was going to create birthday cards for every year of his birthday for her son to give to him on the birthday. That's meaning making, right? Connecting to that. Then experiential values, what we receive from the world. What does the world pour into me? And if you think back to the words that you put into Mentimeter on that first slide, what makes you smile? Those are the things that you receive from the world. Can you bring in the pictures of the family members that pour into them and put it in the room? It's a way of meaning making. Attitudinal values, that's the stance we take toward unavoidable suffering. Now, if someone has just been given a diagnosis or is just beginning a suffering journey, they may not quite be ready to make meaning out of it, right? What do you think they might need to do first before they're ready to make meaning?
Who should be angry?
Yeah, have some feelings about it. Yeah. Process it. Yeah, process it out loud with somebody. There's healing in that. There's even meaning making in that, in honoring how they feel that anger or those emotions that they might not normally express and sometimes aren't comfortable with because we have stigmas around them, right? Okay. And then from those 3 values, there are 3 core assumptions. Meaning in life rather than meaning of life. And that's an important distinction. So over to the right, life has meaning under all circumstances, even the most miserable ones. So there is some meaning to be made. There might be difficult feelings around that meaning. There may be anger, there may be guilt, there may be sadness, there may even be like severe depression around it. But there is some meaning even in that of what that person is going through. The will to meaning, our main motivation for living is our will to find meaning in life. And so what a gift to be able to say to someone in the midst of all that you're going through in this suffering, what will help you open your eyes in the morning when daylight comes? I've yet to find somebody that didn't have something to say about that. Because if they didn't, they probably wouldn't still be here, right? So what is it? There's something that has that intrinsic motivation for each one of us to open our eyes, and even if we're able to put our feet on the floor, even in our most hardest times. And then freedom of will within limits. We have freedom to find meaning in what we do and what we experience. And this is really about agency. So if I'm in the bed and Tiffany is my chaplain and she comes in to see me, Tiffany may have wonderful ideas of how to find meaning to share with me. But for me to connect with them, Tiffany's got to reflect back onto me, right? What is it for me? Tiffany might be able to give me some suggestions to help get me thinking about it, right? But it's highly unlikely that the things that cause me to put my feet on the floor are the exact same things that cause Tiffany. We might share some, but it's unlikely that they would be exactly the same list, right? And so it's very important that I figure out from my own freedom what that means for me. And that we build that together, that dignity of meaning making in that process and in that moment. Well, I'd be surprised if there's anybody sitting here in this room who hasn't found themselves yet in an existential vacuum. But if you haven't, trust me, you won't likely get out of this lifetime without having been in one. And what that means is when a person cannot find a concrete meaning in personal existence and they face a problem of existential frustration, it can result, even at its worst moments, into noogenic neurosis, a neurosis caused by not psychological, but spiritual dimension of human existence. And this is where, as chaplains, our expertise really comes to play in these moments of that deep suffering. So what might that look like? Let's go a little bit deeper. A psychological condition of feeling meaninglessness. Boredom is a major symptom. And when I was looking at slides to include in this presentation, I decided to leave this slide out, but I will bring it up. One that it suggested was scrolling. Mindless scrolling on your phone. I do that sometimes to disconnect from whatever has happened during my day. But if that's all that you're doing, if you're doing it all the time and you're disconnecting, that's a huge red flag, right? That you might be in an existential vacuum. And how does sometimes we fill that existential vacuum? Well, with overeating, with promiscuity, with drinking, with passive entertainment. What are some other things that come to your mind of how you feel people, you, others fill that vacuum that you've heard people share? It's popping.
Ties in with drinking, but someone I was talking to, this week was referring to drug use.
Mine is shopping.
I was gonna say overspending.
Yeah.
I was gonna say overspending.
Yeah.
Impulse
Shopping.
buying.
Impulse buying. Get that dopamine rush, followed by the guilt after you do it.
Mine is just scrolling and just put it in the basket. Leave it there.
Yeah,
Feels good.
sure. Any others that you've observed in your work out on the floors?
There was one who told me his is video games.
Oh, yeah. We have some chaplains that it is definitely an escape for them.
It's a way to get out of dealing with whatever and you're in this other world.
Could shut your brain off and do this.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm an artist. Is that an existential vacuum, or could it be?
I think so.
It could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it depends on why you're creating.
Yep. All right.
I think most anything could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has the potential
Yeah.
to get into the danger zone, so to speak.
And it comes back to the motivation of the action.
What's
Are you
going on?
doing something to relax from a long day, or are you doing
Yes.
something to avoid reality?
Yes. Yeah. So let's translate the principles into action. By doing a deed, we are realizing the creative values. What if I can't do a deed, though? So I want you to think about that, because that is where an intervention comes in, especially in the hospital setting. By experiencing a value, meaning experiencing aspects of truth, beauty, goodness, and realizing the experiential values. This brought to mind a patient when I was doing my residency who was a violinist, I believe, in the Jacksonville Symphony at that time. And he was in a dying process. His wife also played an instrument, maybe a flute. She would come and play, I think it was a flute, at his bedside. But when she couldn't be there, the staff would switch out their cell phones, and they would put their cell phone by his ear and play music that she had shared with them, connected deeply to him. By suffering, we realize the attitudinal values, and that's that. How do we put positive meaning into it without it being toxic positivity, but in a way, maybe I personally would swap positive meaning to hope. How do we find the hope? How do we find the hope? That's good chaplaincy jargon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody was gonna say something, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, that I've witnessed a lot of this in what they do in the child life side of peds.
Oh, say more.
So, you know, for kids, their meaning is often very social. So this week they're planning a birthday for someone who's gonna celebrate their birthday within the hospital, and the staff and others will come around,
Wow.
which will increase, you know, let that child not have something monumental. Birthdays are monumental to children.
Yes, they are.
And that's a pretty common thing. They bring patients together to do art together so that they can relate to other kids that are also in the hospital. And allow them to speak to others that helps them not feel alone in their suffering.
That's a beautiful case. I'm gonna back up here and let's go back and see if we can put it into practice now.
Mm.
I think I went too far. All right, so let's take that case study and talk. What are the creative values in that? What are we giving to the world in that vignette? What's being given to the world?
Which one, the birthday or the art?
The birthday. Let's
birthday.
let's stick with the birthday piece.
What we're giving to the world hope, like we as a department are giving to back hope and value
Mm-hmm.
and through celebration. Would that be?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, any other thoughts on that?
Almost like life, I thought too, because of
Okay.
the aging. It's like we met
Yes.
another year or
Yes.
a day.
Yeah.
It's almost like
The
life
hope
too.
to go on.
To move on in life.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's honoring, it's like ritualistic.
Yes.
Pops in my mind when you say that, a cycle of life,
Yeah.
moving hope, future,
Move forward,
you know,
Yeah.
celebrate what you did and celebrate the
Moving
hope
on,
to come.
transition.
Yeah.
And it's sort of a sense of normalcy too, in a way.
Oh, yeah, I like that.
You know,
Yeah.
it's sort
Yeah.
of normalcy, something that's outside the hospital. Birthdays happen outside the hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other thoughts? Okay, let's talk about the experiential piece. What was received from the world in that?
Joy, perhaps, celebration,
Like you said, hope.
hope,
Mm-hmm.
community, sort of coming together,
Yeah.
interconnectedness.
I also think there's something about when you're a child, how special you feel on your birthday. Like it affirms you as a person and your uniqueness, and you lift up the, you know, your birthday cake is a reflection of something that's meaningful in your life, you know. And the gifts, people, you know, want to give you a gift, and how incredible that feels to feel that kind of love from people. And then let's talk about the attitudinal value, the stance we take toward unavoidable suffering. So we don't know what was going on with that child, but obviously there was some suffering or they wouldn't be in the hospital, right? And so where is the hope that is provided in the midst of that? What are your thoughts about hope in the midst of what happened?
Could that be where the life comes and the hope to move on, the transition?
Yeah.
To look forward?
Yeah.
Could that be?
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say for the child, they're receiving the gift of not missing more than necessary. They're missing so much in the hospital, they're missing their school activities, they're missing whatever they normally do, and so to have something that is a key component of the year and only happens once a year,
Yes.
to have that not be taken,
Yeah.
but to be given, creates that sense of,
Normalcy.
Yeah, it speaks to
The normalcy,
Eric's
what he's saying.
normalcy.
Yeah.
Yeah, next there, I think.
I can't think of the other word that would describe that. I mean, normalcy is the goal of pediatrics. But I think it gives maybe comfort in that they are being celebrated. even though they're in suffering.
I think what came to mind for me when you said that was, I don't even remember where I learned this, but somewhere along the way in my chaplaincy learning, that the person who has cancer is more than their cancer. And how do we talk to them about who they are in the midst of that cancer, if we're looking at the pie again, is only a piece of the pie. There's so much more than that. And I think that scenario speaks to that. You may be here in the hospital and you may be sick, but you're so much more than that. And we're bringing those things that are important to you then.
That's a great way to put it, because that's exactly what I see over and over. Whether it be music therapy was explaining, they had a violinist in peds that they let go into the music room and practice her violin even while she was inpatient.
Wow, that's a perfect example. Yeah.
They celebrate everything that can be celebrated, and I think that is right what you just said. How do we see beyond the sickness?
So I'll pose a question for future reflection so that we stay on track here. And that is, it sounds like we do a really good job of doing that in the pediatric hospital. But how well do we do it for our adults? And is it as important?
It is, absolutely.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
I was just thinking.
Okay, so this is where we are.
Exactly.
So going just a little bit deeper into those three areas, by doing the deed, realizing creative values come not from the greatness of the task, but how one regards and performs his or her task. So what we're putting back out into the world, it's not about how great it is. It's not about receiving the public acknowledgement or awards or money. It is about how the person regards and performs that particular task. That's the meaning part of it. It's not the radius of the activity which is important, but how one feels the circle of his or her task. How is it coming back? How responsibly one performs them. Then on experience all the aspects of life deeply, being sensitive and receptive to all that life has to offer. There are deep experiences of emotions such as wonder and joy of sunset, joy of intimate contact with another, sharing in grief, and then befriending all the emotions, not denying them, but flowing with them without being stuck in them. That's the meaning of life when we're looking at it from the experience section. And then from the attitudinal, accepting all suffering caused by unalterable fate with great courage. Draw strength of purpose from your suffering. Human existence can never be intrinsically meaningless, and life challenges us by putting before us different situations. How do we respond? So I want you to just think for a moment a time in your life where you went through some type of barrier, challenge, or maybe even deep suffering. And were you able at some point to reflect back on that and say, wow, there was a lesson I learned in this? I hear that from patients a lot. I learned this from when I went through blah, blah, blah. And then how do we connect that to where they are currently? Or how do we pose the question of, have you been in an experience before that you felt like you weren't in control, or you felt like you couldn't get past it, or you didn't know how you would survive it? What helped you find hope, resilience, be able to keep putting your feet on the floor in the midst of that? Anybody ask that question to you? Why? Why is this happening to me? Why is God letting this happen to me? Why is God doing this to me? I'm a good person. I don't know why I'm having to go through this. Is all this suffering, all this dying around us a meaning? For if not, then ultimately there is no meaning for survival. And in his book, Frankel says to us, he didn't deny his suffering. He encourages us to acknowledge our feelings about it. And what are we all doing here if we're not doing that, right? As long as we suffer, we remain psychically alive. Suffering leads to maturity because we grow stronger spiritually and richer because of it. And spiritually here might mean religiously, but not necessarily. That we develop meaning and purpose out of that. And sometimes we see people go on to contribute back to places that are similar to their suffering. So maybe I'm a cancer survivor, and in the aftermath I go back and I'm a peer support for people that are going through cancer. Or some of our parents who have lost children, you'll see them go on to do things in honor or memory of their child and reconnect with others. It does not, however, mean that in order to grow, we should create suffering from ourselves. In such case, it becomes a part of our psychological script. But every suffering offers us an opportunity for something. So then what does this look like in our healing profession? Well, it's important for us to remember that nobody can heal anybody. All the healing comes from the self, right? There's your agency. So while you can journey with me in it, I've got to do the work of it. You might help me redefine it. You might help me rediscover it. You might help me rename it. You might help me remember from our narrative therapy class, you know, that I have strength and I have hope and I have courage and I have love. You may journey with me, but I've got to do the work. The patient as a sufferer, particularly when he is ailing from an incurable illness, is always superior to the doctor. Don't tell the doctor that. The doctor is actually helpless in these situations. And they feel that helplessness when they get to the place that they know there is nothing more medically that they have to offer this person. And then that is sometimes when they get stuck in the existential vacuum, and we journey with them in the midst of it as the chapel. How do we then help them understand that that's when the patient becomes the hero? And they can honor the hero in the patient. The only job a doctor can do is to help the patient discover the meaning of their sickness. That's a pretty powerful phrase. I'd encourage you to sit with that a little bit, because that is where you have the ability and the knowledge to bring great healing to the team members in this place. So if you've studied Freud, then you know that Freud's major driving force, pleasure and conscious activities, are governed unconsciously by pleasure principle and avoidance of pain. Everyone strives to seek pleasure and satisfaction within limits of social values and morals, and it's society motivated. So Frankel did not agree with this based on his experience as a Holocaust survivor. And so here was his pushback to that. Even in the most painful, dehumanizing situations, life can be given meaning, and so too can suffering. Our motivation in life is neither pleasure, as Freud had thought, or power, as Adler thought, but to find meaning in it and move forward with renewed purpose. Okay, so let's see, how much time do we have? We're right at 10 minutes, so we'll go through this. They're both very quick. We may not get to the activity that I have for you all that we could do, but you can take it with you, and it's certainly something you can probably use when you're with patients or clients. All right, so here's the vignette. We're at the pediatric hospital. Patient is Alex, a 10-year-old child hospitalized for complications related to a chronic life-limiting illness. Family reports increased withdrawal anxiety and statements about feeling different from peers. Mark, will you read the child script?
Yeah, I don't like my body anymore, it doesn't work right. I feel like I'm not normal, I don't think I can do anything important.
Read it for us one more time, I want us to really sit with it.
I don't like my body anymore, it doesn't work right. I feel like I'm not normal, and I don't think I can do anything important.
Yvette, will you read the counselor? Well, let's let the counselor read the counselor. Irene, will you read the counselor and then Yvette read the chaplain?
It sounds like your body has been through a lot and that feels really unfair. Sometimes when kids go through hard medical stuff, it can make them feel small or broken. You can work together to find ways you still get to be you even while your body is dealing with this.
So the notes say this is a focus on emotional expression, self-concept, and coping. It's developmentally appropriate language, and it avoids theological framing in this situation. Okay, Yvette?
It sounds really hard to feel different like that. Sometimes kids tell me they wonder why their body has to go through this. If you want, I can sit with you and listen, or we can think together about what helps you feel brave or cared for.
So the chaplain notes are an emphasis on presence, spiritual language only if invited, and family-centered care, avoiding therapy goals. So those are two very different responses and two very powerful responses. There's benefit to both of those. My question to you is, do you see the difference? So let's talk about interprofessional role clarity. So counselors and chaplains both attend to meaning, but our roles are different. Counselors integrate meaning within mental health treatment, and chaplains provide spiritual care, presence, and interventions to rename or rediscover meaning. Now, that's not to say that counselors don't do interventions to rename or rediscover meaning, because of course you do, but you do them with a different focus to your work. Now, does that help at all clarify the difference in the work that you do, or does it make it more fuzzy for you? I think it's really important to wrestle with that.
Yeah.
Especially for those of you that are in the chaplaincy tract, to wrestle with that, because there are so many places we overlap in terms of psychotherapy, emotional support, learning theories, and being with people. And we absolutely use basic counseling skills when we are with a person. But where is the line drawn to what we do versus what our counseling interns will do in their careers? Counselors integrate meaning within mental health treatment, and chaplains provide spiritual care presence and interventions to rename or rediscover meaning. And then there's the theological piece of it, right? Because you're gonna have some patients who are going to want to go towards their theological beliefs and understanding as a part of meaning, and how they might be in an existential vacuum because of that. And these are just this is like the bibliography of my PowerPoint. So we're not gonna have time to do the exercise, but let's just take a look at it, because I do want you to have it, and I hope it's something that you can find a way to utilize in your practice as you go along. There's an art therapy activity that's a values compass that's individually focused, and then there's one that you could do in a group setting, because I know some of you are working with groups in your work. So let me just walk you through it, even though we're not gonna do it together. This expressive activity integrates logotherapy with visual mapping to help individuals identify their values, their sources of meaning and direction during times of transition, stress, or uncertainty. No artistic skill is required. So the purpose of it is to clarify their personal values and meaning pathways. and to strengthen a sense of direction, even when circumstances feel constrained, and certainly people in the hospital feel that. Logotherapy emphasizes the human will to meaning and capacity to choose one's attitude toward unavoidable circumstances. And in this activity, participants visually map meaning using the 3 pathways that we've talked about today: creative, experiential, and attitudinal. And all you need for it is a blank piece of paper, some markers, colored pencils or crayons, and you might have a ruler or a compass, but certainly not required. And if you're on the floor and you decide you want to do this very quickly, you can go to the nurse's station, ask for them to give you some printer paper off their printer, and you might look around to see if they have some different colored pens or pencils that you could grab, and you can do this with the patient in a moment. All right. That said, I do want to stop and say, to the last 5 minutes, questions, thoughts, feedback, helpful. Is there something that you wish I had included that I didn't include?
No, this has been really good to give us ideas to really get us thinking how we can incorporate in creative ways in making meaning. I'm thinking about visiting patients and I'm noticing on my floors in the heart hospital, they have the sign that's up, tell me who you are, in the patient's room. And it is a poster board, tell me who you are. And I see different writings from family members or different things like that. And I remember speaking with the patient and her sharing what she values and what was important to her. And I asked the nurses from the nurses station if they had some markers, and I began to write it on the board.
Beautiful.
This is reminding me of that. And I think it's great that the nurses have incorporated that in the
It's like
patient
the
roles.
theory behind what you're
Yes.
seeing in action in that.
So it's really
Probably
spurring a
reminds-
thought for this. I like it a lot. Yeah, especially when patients are struggling.
Yeah, and it probably reminds her, because when she's laying there and you wrote it, she can read it.
Mm-hmm, absolutely,
It's
yeah.
visible.
It's
Yeah,
encouraging, right?
a visible, yeah.
Mhm.
And
That's nice.
it also spurring a thought within me as well of the patient, when you asked when Faith was giving an example with the children, of patients gaining their power back.
Mhm.
When they're feeling powerless and losing control. It gives, they can place their power somewhere and say, I have power in this situation. Yeah. So, yeah, it's been really good. I like it.
That reminds me of a practice that I saw Chaplain on LinkedIn do. I wish I could remember her name, but I don't. Where she did a similar thing with a piece of paper and a marker that she would take with her to her patients' visits and tape it on the door to give cues for the team members coming in about things that were really important to that patient, or things that like maybe the patient was noise sensitive, so please try to keep the noises to a minimum, or just things that would make their experience better for them. It's similar to what you're talking about with a board, but a different way to do it if you're in a room where that is not a practice on the unit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's good. Very good.
Other thoughts?
It would also be good if the doctors could have that type of didactic.
Yes.
No, seriously.
You're right,
No, really,
right.
because that's
It's not a part of their regular training, right?
Right, just to
Right.
know that, you know,
Yeah.
when you get a patient, they have lost autonomy, so when they ask you a question,
Yes.
that's them trying to, continue their, like you said, their agency, their autonomy, that they, don't dismiss me,
Yes, yes.
So that would be something I think the doctor, because that's one thing you hear a lot, with the doctor, they just don't listen and they just walk out.
Or they tell it one time and they forget that the patient's trying to absorb so many different things
Things,
that
right.
they just couldn't absorb it. They just almost put up a block because of the
Because they have
shock
to
of
hear
it,
it,
you
right.
know, I need to hear it multiple times.
Exactly. So that would be something.
That's true.
Be nice.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful way for you all to advocate for them too.
Mhm.
You know, to say to the doctor, listen, I know this is frustrating, you've said it 3 times, but I can't say it. They have to hear it from you,
Mhm.
and they really need you to come back in. And then I'm gonna be there this time, and I'm going to restate it for them
Mm.
after you have left. I'm gonna say it right back to them, let them hear it again.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Very good.
Good thoughts.
Mhm.
Anything else? Thank you for being here. Thank you for
Thank
allowing me to
Oh, thank you
record
for
so that
this.
I can put it in my portfolio.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I hope I know you read lots of things right now, cause all of you are in school, but I hope that, there'll be an opportunity at some point for you to read his book. I think it's deeply, deeply meaningful, especially for this particular type of work that we do.
Mhm.
Good.
Yeah, thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you, So used to
Jeannie, you want me to turn the camera off?
That would be awesome, thank you,
Yes.
sir.